Thank you very much. I will actually be looking at these different factors during my presentation, so look forward to that. First of all, thank you for having me. I want to thank the organizers for all their support in putting together this event. It's a pleasure to be part of such a great panel today. So I'm Carolina Perujo Holland. I'm a senior analyst at ICIS. And today I'm going to give a brief overview of the current state of play for the recycled polymer markets and our future outlook. So first of all, who is ICIS? So we provide pricing, data and analytics for key commodities worldwide in the energy and chemicals industry. Sustainability is a huge part of our business, so we look to support all of you, the entire chemicals value chain, in achieving your sustainability agendas as well. But now going into the recycled polymers market. So I think, as you heard today, the industry has been facing a lot of market challenges, a lot of uncertainty. And here I brought up a few different drivers impacting the industry. We've seen a lot of competition between sustainability agendas and that prioritization of management of costs. So just to look at a few of them here, we've seen regulation is a key driver for the industry. However, it's been quite slow. And what I mean here is that there's still a lot of lack of clarity around measurement and the enforcement of regulation. So there's a lot of uncertainty around that expected demand for recycled polymers, which is really impacting the industry and investment in the industry and that progress that we would like to be seeing. Around voluntary brand commitments, we see there's a lot of shift now to looking at net zero. It's not so much just recycling targets, it's around that sustainability net zero approach. Unfortunately, again, because of macroeconomics, we've seen some brands have to delay or revise some of those recycled content targets, adding again to that uncertainty. Looking then at the fragmented nature, I think we were speaking about that today as well. Every market is very different, and when we talk about fragmentation, that's in terms of legislation, implementation, collection rates, sorting rates, recycling rates, adoption of recycled content as well. So it's very different profile for every different market. Competitive ability of Europe, we mentioned this as well. We have seen now that European recyclers are really struggling because of high production costs, high feedstocks costs in Europe, with trying to compete with the imported prices in other regions. As well, talking about tariffs, trade flows, we've seen logistics issues and freight costs really challenging some of those trade flows more recently. And then low prices of virgin polymers. I think this has really come to light more recently, where buyers of recycled material have really had to question how much they can sustain those higher prices for recycled material, again, given that focus on cost management. And then finally, securing high quality feedstock. So this is one of the reasons why in Europe we're challenged to see any real decrease in recycled polymer prices to help, again, with that competition with virgin material. It's not so much only about securing feedstock, but then maintaining that quality, because we have seen yields changing as well over time. So then, taking into account all these different drivers and trends, how does ICIS see the recycled polymers market in 2050? So just to walk you through these charts, they're quite complex. We have three different charts here, each representing a different region. So we have North America, Europe, and Northeast Asia. The blue bars represent total consumption expected in 2050 for each of the polymers. So here we're looking at polyethylene, polypropylene, and polyethylene terephthalate, so PET. And then the green bars show the expected production volumes for recycled material via mechanical recycling in those domestic regions. And as you can see, looking at the penetration rate, so in the black numbers, compared to the blue numbers, which represent 2024 penetration levels, we expect these numbers to grow. So there is growth expected between now and 2050. However, I've put a caveat up in the title to say, however, it's still limited. And what I mean by that is, given the ambitious targets that we have, are being announced via voluntary commitments, but also via legislation, we still have a ways to go. And I think here we really need to consider economics and how that really impacts the rate of progress of the industry. And then zooming into Europe, just as a case study. So here we have the EU packaging and packaging waste regulations. I've highlighted a few of the recycled content targets and reuse targets that have been set for 2030 and 2040. Now, this regulation does impact Europe or the European Union, but I think it's a regulation that many markets outside the EU are also looking and monitoring. It came, as one of my fellow panelists mentioned today, it was passed into law earlier this year. However, again, there's still a lot of concerns around the packaging and packaging waste regulation. These are very ambitious targets, not just impacting PET, but all polymers. We also currently in Europe don't have an EFSA food contact solution for polymers that are not PET. And then reuse targets, this is something new. This will impact the value chain. It's not easily implemented with the current value chains that we have. It requires investment and new infrastructure. And then finally, the chemical recycling status. Can chemical recycling contribute to meeting those targets? And also, what mass balance approach will be used to be able to measure this? So then, how is the EU progressing against these different targets? I've taken here PET as an example. Again, we have two different charts. On the left, we have 2030, and on the right, 2040 data. The purple bars show the total expected consumption for the PET or impacted applications of PET by the PPWR in 2030. The blue bar is the amount of mechanically or recycled material that we will need to meet those targets. And then the green shows what ICS's view is for mechanically recycled material in 2030. The dark blue showing the same, but for chemically recycled material. Again, this is domestic production. So it seems here from the different charts that for 2030, we're at a good point to meet those targets. And 2040, however, will be a bit of a challenge. However, I want to really highlight two caveats. I think the first is that the green bar here shows mechanically recycled material. Not all of this is food contact approved. And this is really something to keep in mind when we think about PET and the main end-use applications. And second of all is that we also have to consider voluntary commitments, often going beyond the regulatory targets. And these will also put additional pressure on the available material on the market. So it seems that EU will probably have to look beyond just the EU to be able to meet these targets if things stay as they are. So what does all of this mean for pricing? So here, what I've done is I've taken yearly average spreads. This is the difference between recycled PET food-grade pellet material and virgin PET material. So when the bar is above zero, it means that recycled PET costs more than virgin PET. On the left, we have Europe, and then on the right, we have, on the light blue is US, and in purple, we have Asia. And I think what's really interesting here is that since 2011, recycled PET has cost more than virgin PET, and this has been sustained since then. But I think what I really want to highlight is that the US is sort of mirroring what happened in the EU, but at a bit of a lag. So if you look at 2019 in Europe, we saw a big increase here in that spread. And on the right-hand side, in 2023, you see a similar uplift in the US. And this was driven by regulation. In 2019, the Single-Use Plastic Directive was passed into law in the EU, where we had recycled content targets set for PET bottles in 2025 and bottles in 2030. And then in 2023, in the US, 5 different states set packaging recycled content targets. Again, this is not a federal mandate, it's very much driven on a state level, but it had an impact on prices. Asia is slightly different. Again, legislation is very fragmented, but we saw that initiative from recycled PET producers to target overseas markets, given these recycled content targets that industry had to meet. And I think what this here highlights is that with that regulation and with those targets, these spreads or this uplift above virgin that increases and those premiums can be achieved, but also that influence or that direct impact with virgin PET prices in this case, but we saw this also in recycled PE and recycled PP as well, that decreases. So there still is that influence between virgin and recycled prices, but it's not a direct impact. And then my last slide, again, just looking again at prices. So feedstock is often one of the most volatile parts of the production costs when we look at recycling. Volumes depend very much on what us, the consumers, produce, what industry produces, and waste needs to be managed. So removing that, so here now we're looking at that spread or that delta between recycled material and that bale cost. On the left-hand side, this is blow molding natural pellets, so a packaging suitable grade. And on the right-hand side, we have pipe grade black pellets, generally not going into packaging applications. And as you can see, the spread is very different. Again, regulation. Regulation is allowing these spreads or these higher premiums on prices. When we look on the right-hand side, these non-packaging grades that don't yet have regulation or legislative targets set for you to use recycled content, these grades are still being traded predominantly on a cost-saving basis. So they are very much monitoring what's happening in the virgin market. So although it's not a direct impact, we do still see virgin prices acting as a sort of ceiling. So when we look recently at the different spreads here over the past few years, it's not a margin chart exactly, but when we consider that conversion cost can be between 400 and 500 euro per ton, the non-packaging market has really been suffering with squeezed margins more recently. So I think here what I want to conclude is that we can really expect those packaging grades that are impacted by regulatory targets to continue having these higher prices. So this is my last slide. I'm going to finish. I think there's just one more left. There you go. This is just a list of all our sustainability products. So all these products here can help support you in achieving your sustainability agendas. And if you're interested, please do reach out. We're a chatty bunch, love to talk about recycling. So please do. And with that, thank you very much for your attention.